the needs of the country. So this is a new requirement. So how do you assess whether they will like the needs of the community? So this is where they expect you to take a feedback with respect to the available services being in line with their expectations, or they are looking forward to anything new in that particular area. So accordingly, either you can take a call to add or even modify your services accordingly in consonance with the needs of the local. So this is the one change which has been brought about. And then second one is on healthcare services should have diagnostic and treatment services with qualified. The first two parts are there in this. Because I am saying I am providing pediatric services, or I am talking about cardiac related services, surgical services, then it should have appropriate diagnostic services also. I cannot say I do cardiac procedures, but without having a CT scan or a cath lab, which are becoming adjoined to the required services. Right? And second part is talking about qualified person who can provide all the three types of services a typical organization will have: outpatient, inpatient, and emergency. The need for qualified personnel again has been such a point here. In each department services, they want you to define. So there's an asterisk mark here. Wherever the object agreement has an asterisk mark, means you need to have a documentation. So they want you to document each healthcare service of each department. It should be defined very clearly. And defined services are prominently displayed. There is no change with respect to the earlier edition. That can display with the talk about requirements again to meet the local language requirements, obviously, right? So broadly, an example of a typical clinical or support service in 24 hours of display could have could be like this. So this is one example which I am just picking it out for you. The more important thing is the department wise when you talk about it. So you may then ask about, I do not have so much of space to define all this or rather display all the services. So what do? So in each cases, the defining is a major requirement.
Ramakrishnan sir, sorry, don't take me wrong. There is actually a slight echo and inaudibility coming in.
Echo is not controllable from my side. I think you need to look into it. What is there?
No, once more.
I am talking very close to the mic as it is holding it in my hand, as you can see.
Yeah.
And this doesn't have such echo-related problems at all.
No, Ram, Ashwin, you can just suggest some other way which you can get the audio across.
Yeah. Ram, for us, we can hear you, sir, but few attendees are saying that
maybe see what is the...
Can you join the audio conference to the mobile phone if it's okay with you?
I think there will be a problem. Connecting is going to be a problem.
So there is a toll-free number for Chennai given on that. Can you dial that number in? Can you read out the number, Ashwini, to Ram?
Sure, but okay. Ramson, the number that you will have to call in for Chennai. 1 second, sir.
I think 044648.
Yes.
Yeah.
The number, yeah, you have the number, right? So that number.
002.
Yeah, just dial that number.
And the access
Guide me
code.
through 1 minute. I am just calling. Okay, I have connected now to this.
Put the hash number, yeah.
Ramakrishnan sir, on your screen, click on audio conference. And sure.
Exit this.
Okay, sir. Stop sharing, sir. It's okay. Stop sharing.
Let's hope we don't have a break again. Ram, please go ahead, sir.
Okay. Continuing from where we left on the department signing. The scope of
We can hear you now. Yes, we can hear you.
Fine. Very good. Okay. So the department signages and have this requirement defined like this. The requirement is department signage to be defined, services to be defined. So the options for you that you don't have adequate space for display, the options that are suggested is you can use brochures. That is the way by which you can make the ultimate purposes should be made available to the patients on demand or made available in the place of registration so that they can get to know about the scope of services of specific departments before availing the services. Second one, it talks about written guidance for registering an RPG. So earlier, we used to have a terminology called as documented policy and procedure. Now that is getting replaced by written guidance. Wherever we had documented policy and procedure, those words are getting replaced by written guidance. So what is the written guidance mean? Let us see what it is. Typical example. Along with this, unique identification number generated for every registration. That means the number that is given to the OP or IP, whatever it is, unique to the patient. Suppose the patient comes in as initially OP patient, later is admitted, and you have got an IP missing. Ultimately, the same person should be identified by a unique. That is very important. UHID generation, unique ID generation is important. Patients are accepted only if organization can provide required service. You may have some of the services maybe only in the OP, but IP admissions are not there accepted. So in which case, you need to now see to it that when the end-to-end services are provided appropriately and displayed also. Right? And particularly in case of emergency, I know where you don't have trauma care and all, but the hospital's mandatory requirement is to stabilize the patient before they can be referred to the hospital. The written guidance addresses also managing patients during non-availability. So these are similar to the earlier edition what we have had. And access to healthcare service organization repair. So these two we'll just see by an example. Typically, written guidance. What we mean by written guidance is like typical documented policy. Here we are talking about step-by-step instruction. How the registration in your hospital is done. So it is specific to your hospital. And how the admissions are done in your hospital. And registration also cover all categories. When we talk about registration, new OP will be there, existing OP also will be there, follow patients, follow-ups, and then patients coming only for investigation, that also will be done. So these are different categories of patients for whom the service could be provided. Again, admission, when we talk about it, admission can happen through PD, or can also happen through the emergency. These two also accordingly is properly written down in terms of a guidance. How you do it in your organization. And normally in an emergency situation, people immediately take the patient to the EM area, get the triage and go for the further requirements as suggested by the NT. But it is the requirement that these patients also can be subsequently registered. And it also covers admission, which can cover ABA patients, unidentified patients, MLC related cases. So all these need to be very clearly defined in your guidance. In case of non-availability of beds, what is the provision that you have got? Where are you going to accommodate those patients who come, or are you going to turn them away or to a referral hospital? What is the type of arrangement we are going to do? These all should be very clearly defined, including MLC related cases. The other objective when it comes to access to healthcare services and organization priority for clinical needs. So this is where we talk about wherever either those being some patients are waiting as per their turn, after turn, patient can see in some of these patients who are all having immediate need for seeing the These could be some of the examples of patients with giddiness in the OPD we see immediately. We need to define that also. Pregnant women with labor pains immediately will be seen. Patient with pain, chest pain, with acute abdominal pain, severe vomiting cases, high fever cases, patient with injuries, or MLC cases. So all these are the things which make an exception with respect to the sequence in which they can be seen. Right? So this needs to be very clear. This access prioritization will be very clearly defined. So there's an asterisk mark here. So it needs to be documented. Right? When it comes to AAC3, transferring of patients, the organization is done appropriately. So they say transferring can be within multiple departments, between departments also, maybe patient transfer can happen. Patients who are there in the ward, they can be taken into transfer to maybe imaging area or the laboratory area, as the case may be, or physiotherapy area. So within the organization, how do you do that? Because the requirement for all this is how do you take care of the patient. Because the moment they are admitted, they are your patients, you have accountability for them. You need to ensure they are safe. So any transfer that takes place, safety need to be definitely kept at the top of your mind. So normally we say the stretchers that you use or the wheelchair that you need to appropriate fastening belts so that you need to start using it. Right? Transfer of again or a referral where you need to even transfer out cases can be there for some imaging tests or for some blood tests who have been in-house. You have an arrangement outsourced it. In which case, you need to or for an imaging particularly, you need to take them out. Right? You need to take them to another facility. That should be done appropriately. Here again, check mark is there. That means how they will take it. Who will accompany the patients? All these conditions need to be specified, including referral cases where you don't have further treatment options in your organization. So you need to refer them where you are already given as part of the written guidance which hospital nearest hospital where you will refer them. And you have an MOU with that hospital. These are the requirements. During transfer or referral, accompanying staff who should accompany. That also need to be very clearly documented. Where critical cases are there, clinician or a senior nurse should accompany. These are requirements. Organization gives summary of patient's condition during such referral or transfer out so that the organization which subsequently is going to take care of this patient have a first-hand information of the patient's condition rather than then going through again the initial diagnosis, initial this, whatever they were. Patient has undergone here, those initial things can be passed on to them in a very formal way. Transfer in, these are the things we talk about. It also covers types of patients, stable patient, unstable patients. Right? So we talk about unstable patients that also need to be defined very clearly. Patients having Glasgow scale less than 14, are having a temperature less than 33, pulse rates are having paralysis or respiratory rate below 12 or above 24. So all these things are constituted an unstable patient. So they need to be transferred safely, appropriate safety measures and appropriate accompanying staff. Transfer out referral again. Outside the hospital, patient is first discharged from your hospital because you are no more going to provide them the services that they will require. And the choice of transportation is the patient or family member where you are stable patients you are transferring outside. Referral patients to other facilities for any investigation. Patient again you are transported in a specific non-cardiac ambulance as the case may be and accompanied by a senior nurse. Details of referral are entered in the case sheets. Designated staff only do the transfer. That means they need to be really identified. And stable patients to be stabilized in emergency before such transfer state. So this is how we start documenting the requirements. Coming to AIC4, patients cared for by the organization undergo an established initial assessment. Again, one thing which I want to do, I forgot to do earlier. The left side you see core and CE. Core means is the core objective element which is required to be basically met for the final assessment. C which stands for commitment, level of this also needs to be met. Coming to the core initial assessment of patients covers patients including daycare patients. As the case may be, we are having daycare some of the scope of services and emergency patients. And you all know initial assessment is performed by qualified person. It means also minimum MBBS qualification. BMS or other qualifications are not supported during the initial assessment. And also that time frame within which you do it is equally important depending upon the need of the patient. Somebody requires immediate initial assessment for transfer to emergency or surgery area, accordingly it needs to be performed. Initial assessment, daycare and patient includes nursing assessment. So you need to have appropriate nursing assessment. This is also to be documented along with the time of admission, which needs to be documented. So initial assessment, OPI, EM, normally can cover. These are the factors which can be covered in the document. Who can perform the assessment, which will be clearly defined, time frame for the initial assessment, within what time admission or within what time initial the patient coming into the OP, they have to make the initial assessment, it really depends. And then include all else, any pain related disease, pain assessment within appropriately. All this are nursing assessment is for the IP, emergency related cases. They can also nutritional screening of the patient. This is not nutritional assessment, it's all about screening who will need what type of specific nutrition. This screening will be done by the treating doctors and document the patient medical record. Dietitian can support with exact nutritional requirements depending upon the needs and as per the treating doctor guidelines and appropriate diet chart also provided. Initial assessments for inpatient results in the documented care plan is the same as what we had in competition. This is coming under achievement. This will be taken up for the next level during the surveillance assessment. But all the more said and done, in fact, any assessment is done followed by a CAP. What is the CAP plan? CAP plan is supposed to be what are the course of intervention that will be provided to the patients. Right? All those things will be provided along with preventive aspects of care, promotive aspects of care, rehabilitative aspects of care, which are deemed necessary for a specific patient as a patient. A care plan is to be signed by the clinician in charge of the patient within 24 hours. This is the same as what we had in the earlier profession also. We retained it, but achievement. There's one more thing, care plan identification of social needs regarding care. So what is that we talk? Document a care plan, initial diagnosis, differential diagnosis, and then relevant diagnostic investigation, specific goals and objectives desired to be achieved, what has to be there as part of the care plan, and specific instructions if any. Differential diagnosis, for example, acute bronchitis could be a differential diagnosis, could be there, the patient coming with a common cold or a cough, may differential diagnosis as a common cold, differential diagnosis, and appropriate any investigation to be given, to be prescribed. And any care plan needs to be supported with the preventive aspect of the care or the promotive aspect of the care, which will improve the cost of convalescence, preventive aspect or rehabilitative aspect. So depending upon whichever is necessary for the specific, should be included in the documentation and the care. Care plan composite limitation, special needs. What are the special needs? Like ages, do's and don'ts for the specific patient, depending upon what gaps maybe like taking medicine before food or after food or within a specific time, etc. These are to be specified in line with the thing. This is the thing which comes under excellence related. Chapter 5, we talk about AAC 5, we talk about it. Patient reassessment. We talk about reassessment and appropriate intervals to determine their response to treatment for the thing. Reassessment, when is it necessary? What are the requirements for the reassessment? Right? Outpatients are informed of the next follow-up. We'll see that some more as it is. For inpatient during reassessment, care plan is monitored and modified as found necessary. There's a requirement for modification or requirement for monitoring. And staff involved direct clinical care document the reassessment. What they clinician or the nursing who are involved in the direct care, they need to document the reassessment. And the last one is this organization relies on guidelines and implements process to identify the early warning signs. So that will be early warning signs of change that are there or deterioration in the condition of the patient that requires proper intervention. So we'll see what it's all about. There comes reassessment, and then you allow to determine one, whether the patient is responding to already provided the nursing intervention or not. Can one to identify that any other problems that the patient is coming up with. Appropriately update your plan care to suit the emerging conditions. Third one, confirm the validity of the data of the initial assessment. So this is also one of the requirements in the assessment. If the initial prognosis you are given, as part of the initial assessment. So you want to validate it. So you do your e-assessment, you see whether falling in line with your initial prognosis. E-assessment detect a patient's changing needs. Right? This is a clinical, either clinical improvement or a requirement for any new information that is coming in the assessment. For example, an abnormal lab report or a radiography results provide a new impetus for line of treatment. Or there may be evidence from sudden change in the patient. This is deterioration, for example, loss of confidence. So the plan is accordingly modified. So this is the way they say the assessment need to be documented, provided all these conditions are also taken into account. It up to modified early morning system. So these are the parameters under which screenings are done. We talk about respiratory rate, heart rate, systolic blood pressure, urine output will be definitely taken, temperature and neurological condition. Neurology condition, we talk about ABV, ABP score, that means whether the patient is alert to any signals, whether he is reacting to your voice commands, or whether they are reacting to any pain, or they are totally unresponsive. So if you look at it, scoring given, there is a median which is 0. If things are perfectly fine, falling under this 0 conditions, the score is 0 is given. If it is in case like respiratory rate falling below 8, then a score of 2 is given. If it is above 21, 29, then score of 2 is given. Right? So when to give the appropriate score, 0, 1, 3 is appropriately given for the various values of these parameters. So the final condition that we need to assess is based on this early warning score. The scores are between 3 to 4 or the summation, then it can be managed by the teams. Nothing to worry about, still it is under control. Scores are 5 to 6 range, then regular monitoring, more frequent monitoring, urgent review is required. Goes beyond 7 plus, then very urgent review is required. So this is how the system works, which is used normally to see the frequency of monitoring to improve, or any other new interventions to be done, or any urgent. Coming to lab services, should be in line with the services that the organization is providing. It means whatever services that you have, the OP service, the emergency service, the surgical service, we need to have appropriate lab services also as an ongoing thing. Infrastructure, mainly for the lab, when you talk about it, should be adequate. Say adequate, minimum requirements to be met, we'll see what it is. Human resource requirement also to be adequate. We talk about the education, the staff who are there manning the testing related thing, and also supervisory staff, and also the signatory, authorized signatory. We see nothing about it. Qualified and trained personnel performance of the say. There's a requirement of written guidance here again. Test collection identification. This is the same as what we had earlier also. We were in the fourth edition, we are talking about documented policy and procedure. That meant the same thing as come as written guidance. So let us see some examples of this. Infrastructure, we talk about it. Normally, there should be a clear separation of pre-analytical area, analytical area, post-analytical area. There should not be too much clustering. This is a very major requirement because today we find that I got microbiology, I got biochemistry, but I got one single wash basin as well as blind people cross over and try to do this. So definitely this is not allowed. It should be definitely independent. As it is, there is no crossovers in between. Again, lab staff service is important qualification criteria. The requirement is we need NABL specific criteria for accreditation of medical laboratories. NABL standards. Or alternatively, they say you need to meet the Clinical Establishment Act of the states. Today you find Clinical Establishment Act for some of the states, they have made it very clear with respect to what the lab should have, including the space that you need to have, the qualification of the people. But we'll see subsequently, the one critical example I'll show you of Clinical Establishment Act of the ABAP. Display of critical test values. Today all the values, we talk about it. Whatever critical values that are there have been beyond, which call for immediate attention, are to be displayed also for the benefit of the patients. And the record for critical reporting also should be there. There should be a record maintained for that. So we talk about the Clinical Establishment Acts. particularly of the AP, even that is there in Tamil Nadu also. Supervisory person, what they have talked about, large and super specialty laboratories, which are the manned by medical person. This is there for any type of organization. The qualification criteria, postgraduate qualification, pathology, I think MD pathology is a mandatory requirement, or MD in microbiology or biochemistry. Again, allopathic doctors must man and supervise small and medium laboratories. Small and medium, these previous qualified doctors should be there, and such a doctor shall be a full-time employee, does not allow to run a separate similar establishment elsewhere. This is the requirement coming out of clinical establishment. When any laboratory that performs histo and cytopathology related things, or special hematology tests, they should be manned with postgraduates with a specific specialty comes. So this is the specific requirements governed by clinical establishment. When it comes to lab testing personnel, they need to begin qualified DMLT criteria and have been specified. One deviation they are given a laboratory may employ two person staff without appropriate qualification, but alternatively they need to have experience of at least 5 years in a recognized laboratory. So this has to be proven. So you need to have appropriate staffing, appropriate qualification criteria wherever the lab is concerned, right? When lab results, when we talk about it, should be defined within available within a defined. That's why we talk about TAD time. Turnaround time should be displayed for the benefit of the patients also. Critical results, they are intimated to the person concerned earlier. When you talk about some critical values or critical tests to be done, just coming from the patient is surgical data, and the clinician requests for some critical tests to decide some course of intervention. These results, which are immediately communicated to the person concerned, over requests. The same clinician through the phone, but at the same time, these need to be documented also. This is subsequently after informing them. We have certain format. I'll show you what it is. And whatever lab results reports are given, should be in a very standardized manner. It should have definitely reference values for the particular test also, along with signature, time and date, etc. Again, mechanism to address recalls, amendments of the report. Suppose errors, the report that you have given to the patient or the clinician, how you recall those. There should be a mechanism for it. What is the thing? This is standard reporting of critical lab results. You obviously start with the date when the test was done, patient ID or the name, this parameter which has to be checked, critical value that is reported to the clinician. Who has reported to whom? Clinician, their name or whatever it is there. Reported by whom? Who the lab in charge who has done it. And finally, later, maybe regularize this report with signature from the clinician, right, along with the time. So this last two columns is for regularization, but the record will be maintained. Recall, when we talk about it, there are three possibilities of error amendments to be definitely corrected. One is, in case of errors in the report, you give an alternative report. Corrected report given to the clinician. Still, the patient is there in the hospital, so you give it to the clinician and nursing, and the whole report should be withdrawn. Very importantly, you need an evidence that you have withdrawn the whole. Second one is given to the patient, and the patient has already left the organization. So, what is there should be a mechanism of contacting the patient through the contacting the record, get back the old report and replace it with the new report is there, and exactly tell him what are the changes that have happened. Third case, you are maintaining a HMI system, the reports are getting generated. You should be able to replace it in the system also with modification and with comments on why this has been done, so that anybody looking at it will know, yes, this is a modified report, earlier one that had an error, there was an error, all these things. And this recall, notwithstanding whatever the activity that we have done, should be followed by the analysis why this happened. It should be appropriate corrective action, preventive action, should be documented, so that there are no further recurrences. Right? So this is the requirement of the standard. Lab tests not available in the organization. What do you do? You don't have some of the tests. Yes, you can always outsource it. The labs outside. So in all these cases, the requirements are there. First and foremost, You need to ensure a formal MOU is made that outside an organization where you are testing outsourced lab, then a stamp paper appropriately. And by giving this MOU, the terms and conditions are very clearly specified. What are the responsibilities of the outsourced lab? How the sample collection will be done? How the sample will be transported? How it will be stored? How it will be stored? How the testing will be done? So that means all these come under quality assurance requirements. Whatever they need to maintain at their level. So need to be very clearly specified in your MOU itself. Right? That quality assurance program that need to have a quality assurance program. The quality assurance program is something to do with assuring to the patient as well as the clinician that the test results are reliable. I mean, reliability means
Just stay tuned. Ramakrishnan sir, we couldn't hear you. Yeah, all the participants stay tuned, please. We'll just check with Mr. Ramakrishnan sir for a minute. Ram sir? Ram sir, we can't hear you. No sir, we can't hear you, sir. Sir, could you disconnect and rejoin the audio again? We can't hear you, sir.
audio alone I can to rejoin.
Yeah. Sir, I can hear you now. Sir, I can hear you now.
Oh, it's fine. Is it fine now?
Yes, sir, we can hear you now.
No, maybe the first time we are having it because the screen is full. I don't know whether this is happening sometimes.
In between, but I think we could hear you. Back again, sir. We can hear you, sir. Please continue. Please take it, sir.
Okay, now go back. Yeah. Now, for the benefit of all those, I can start again this recall. I hope that is where we got stuck. Hope so. Mechanism for recall and management of reports. There are three possibilities which can happen. One is that the report is given to the clinician and at that time you find there's an error. So you need to replace the report which is given to the client. Right? So you modify the report and then give it back to him in case of error in the report. The second case would be the patient has already left the organization. How will you track back? So there should be a mechanism of contacting back the patient, getting back the old report, replacing it with the modified corrected report, and telling him which is the correct report to be used, and in fact get back the old report to be with him. Third case is where the organization is using an XMIS generated report. There also you need to ensure remove the old report was given error on report, replace with the corrected report. The comment also saying why it was done so that there is always a record that this report has been replaced with a new one. And the recall process should be followed up by analysis of why it happened, what went wrong, respect giving the error prone report, and appropriate corrective action and preventive action so that again it doesn't recur. Outsourcing, when we talk about those tests which you don't have in your laboratory, you need to give it outsourced laboratory. Two broad requirements. First and foremost is having a formal MOU with the outsourced lab, binding them on whatever processes they do, including sample collection, how they will do, how they will transport the sample safely, how they will do the storing of the sample safely, and then how they will do the testing of the sample. So these are we talk about quality assurance requirements. All the quality assurance requirements they need to be definitely doing, and the MOU can bind them. MOU can be signed stamp paper. Right? It can only be enforceable. AC7, we talk about quality assurance program, we'll see in detail what contents of it should be. The program, as part of the quality assurance, it should also cover verification, validation, test method, and then it should ensure quality of test results, periodic calibration, maintenance. All these are covered as part of the program. And last one is an excellence related standard addresses clinical pathological, maybe PhD or PC. It's a quality assurance program. Any quality assurance program, either it be lab or imaging, normally we try to broadly cover 4 aspects. First and foremost is the environment under which the testing will be done. That means we are talking about temperature and humidity levels and all those. Because many of these interfere when you do the test. So these need to be specified for various categories of tests. Second one, talk about is the resources that you are using for doing the tests. It includes glassware, chemicals, reagents also. These reagents all need to be ensured that procure them from authorized agents and error proven. Again, specifications are used for conducting inspections of items which are delivered by supplier. That means there is an incoming inspection which is done for all the items supplied, either the chemicals or the reagents that are supplied, or the kits that are supplied. Based on that, only you are involving. And standard glass file, etc. will be used. Again, chemical materials will be analytical grade. That where we talk about appropriate purity levels, right? And storage of the chemical is very important. There are some reagents require room temperature, some require 8 degrees. Appropriately, the temperature and the storage will be maintained. That's why you require a fit out. The kits what to use, they need to be maintained at particular temperature, including appropriate humidity conditions, as specified by the manufacturer. So these need to be stored effectively so as not to have full efficacy of those chemicals will be used. Again, say internal quality control samples are run, that means during every test, you run an initial internal test or what we say IQC test to see that your equipment, everything is meeting the broad requirements of the product. Then one more thing which we call as external quality assurance. In addition to the internal quality control and assurance which you are doing with all these controls, external quality assurance has got to do with giving your samples to under third-party laboratory and have it tested in their environment to see whether the results are within acceptable limits. Because today you cannot expect to have the same exact data report values. There can be variation, but they are within certain acceptable limits. So we saw upper critical limit or lower critical limit that will be established for that particular test value. So we see whether we are still within that limit. So this gives an assurance of the methodology of your test. In fact, CMC does external quality control assurance related system. They register you for that. You register online. Samples are again sent. They send a pre-tested sample, their lab to you. You again tested in your lab, and then report the values to online. They see whether how far the errors are within the acceptable limit of right. Look at lab comparison is another way of quality assurance. For some of the tests for clinical pathology or serology, that in-house is not possible. The requirement is that lab comparison. It is another lab in the same city, you send it to them and have it tested. So this is again another requirement as part of the quality assurance. Equipment maintenance today, any testing that is done on the equipment, the values are totally dependent on the equipment. That's why we talk about equipment calibration is important. And equipment should be available. That means we are talking maintaining the equipment rather than waiting for a breakdown maintenance. You have preventive maintenance or a routine maintenance. So these are the things which are again covered under quality assurance program. That means you predefine each of the equipments also at what periodicity you will be checking it up. Right? With respect to QA program addressing clinical pathology correlation. So here that we talk about that tests that are being done is used to correlate whatever the initial diagnosis the clinician has given, initial findings of the clinician. So this is very important stage which the NIH insists on. So the results are cross-verified by the clinician. We try to see whether should I do a retesting if based on my earlier diagnosis, my observations of the tests are not really come out. Should I do a re-verification of the samples or a retest? or he can try to do either any other modification in his regimen of treatment. And if a retest is ordered, the entire QA program also goes in for a recheck, right from sampling, agent control, storage condition, everything is relooked, and you need to revalidate your QA program. Right? Chapter 8, we talk about establishment of laboratory safety group. This is the third part of the exercise. And we talk about ensuring both the lab personnel adhere to safe practices and because of their safe practices, the outcomes of the results are also. So safety program, when we talk about it should be aligned with the organization overall safety program. So overall, the HCO safety requirements are there along with the lab safety also is very well aligned with that. The frequency of what they call the risk assessment is normally done. We'll see under SMS chapter. All these are again aligned as part of it. Lab personnel use of safe practices while testing, and they are provided with appropriate safety measures. So the safety program should cover by and large use of appropriate PPEs with the lab staff. It could be gloves that they are, or it could be apron which they may need to wear overcoat. Again, in some cases where they are using acids and all that, appropriate goggles to prevent any splash, dye, accidental splash. All these are required to be used with the lab staff. Again, identification equipment that can cause injury. For example, if you rotating equipment that are there and provision for appropriate safety labs, safety gear, equipment, finger guard, these are required to be provisioned as part of the safety program. And start training on safety measures. So they need to be told and regularly trained on the safety measures that they need to get right from PPE use and the use of guard appropriately. In addition to that, fire safety also. And to be trained on fire safety. Yesterday I have seen many hospitals within the lab, and either they don't have appropriate fire extinguishers at all, but all they have it, staff are never oriented using those extinguishers. So fire safety training to lab staff is also equally important. Again, display of appropriate motion signs, safety signs in the lab. Right, there are various safety signs that are there, like corrosive liquid that you are using, or explosive materials that can be there. Appropriate caution signs are there, put up the storage space wherever you are storing them. These are all in chemicals that you are using to be appropriately labeled. Again, labeling should pertain to what the manufacturer has given. And so we talk about where harmful chemicals that are there. There's something called material safety data sheet. MSDS is there, which is provided normally to the manufacturer of the chemicals. It contains do's and don'ts in case of any harmful effect of spillage. So rather than after a spill has happened, you start looking out for MSDS. As a mandatory practice, ensure that MSDS, all the chemicals staff are exposed to or oriented. So the moment such any inadvertent exposure happens, they know what to do immediately. They start rushing or taking care of as per the manufacturers. So some of the safety related labels that are normally mentioned about oxidizers, there are toxic chemicals, corrosive chemicals, or gases that are high pressure which are there. You have a separate symbol for it, right? Carcinogens that are there, again separate symbol is there. Irritants are there, you separate symbol. Environmental toxicity, that means disposal practices to be appropriately maintained as per manufacturer specifications. These are appropriately put up in the lab area, the storage area, chemical whatever you use, right? Again, coming to imaging services, services are provided as per the scope of services that the organization is providing. First and foremost is legal and other requirements. Well, imaging mostly where X-ray and other CDs are there, where the radiation effects are there, what we call as scattered radiation effects. They need to have appropriate ERP approvals, right? And scope of imaging services is commensurate with the services provided by the organization. Suppose you are using cardio stent procedures and all that, it is mandatory to have appropriate facilities also, right? And sometimes you may need to have even other related requirements like X-ray and other things, have the requirements for fluorography and all that, right? Then infrastructure, physical equipment, human resource, they are adequate to provide 25 below. Infrastructure, we talk about it, flighting of the equipment, where you are flighting it, appropriate protective gear and all those coming in part of the requirements. Patient transport in a safe and timely manner for the imaging services is again similar to what we saw in the lab related services. And as an example, we say cardiac catheterization service provided then cath lab facility requirement. Neurosurgery is done, CT scan is a requirement. And in some cases, extended fluoroscopy is a requirement for certain transcatheter procedures. So, whenever you are doing these procedures, supporting imaging services should be there. Again, infrastructure, radiation protection zone, prevent scattered radiation affecting the patients. Today, we talk about ARB approvals. ARB provides approval for siting the equipment. There are three levels of which ARB comes into picture. One is the equipment, whatever you are buying, should have a type approval certificate from Public Energy Regulatory Board. That means it meets with mandatory exposure limits and all. This is done by the manufacturer of the equipment. That means while he manufactures for each batch of the typical equipment that he manufactures, he needs to get approval and a certificate called as a type. And it meets with mandatory exposure limits and all that. And second level of this thing is the area where you are going to locate the X-ray or the imaging the sick, you get an approval for PAN every year. Third, once you do that, you construct or start providing the equipment in the place, or we call it siting the equipment in a specific location. Post siting it, you need again repeat the test for any scattered radiation effects, submit the report and get an approval. That's the finally you are ready to operate the equipment. This should be done periodically. Yeah.
Nancy, I'm just stopping in for a minute. We have about 10 minutes plus to complete the presentation for the Q&A. We've extended by 15 minutes, sir.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
We have another 15 minutes to complete the presentation before we go on a Q&A, sir.
Excellent.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So these are the three levels at which area related requirements. That's where we talk about infrastructure requirements. And then we talk about human resources, radiation safety officers, detail, and then technicians should be appropriately qualified and trained. Right? Complaint the legal department, we talk about ERP results, and then patient identification appropriately. We talk about imaging services, safe and timely transportation. We set time frame for all this. We talk about time right? For each of the different types of tests that you do on X-ray or CT or whatever you are having. Critical result reporting similar to lab. Critical values are to be communicated to the surgeon in operation. Immediately the communication is done to appropriate clinicians and the record is also maintained as per what we have already seen. As a mechanism for recall, amendment of report similar to laboratory reports, where there is an errors which could happen on the report that are given in the image report. Amendments are done and appropriate corrective ones are only given to the patient or clinicians. And in the if it is having digital related mechanism is there, ensure the reports are appropriately commented upon. Replace patient recall for outpatients be done. Outsourcing is not available in-house. To be done again with the third party where they have a testing facility, imaging facility, have an appropriate remote along with QA provisioning. So this is what we have some recalls, what we have talked about. First, assurance imaging to implement. Instead, we say the assurance quality assurance program is the ERB guidelines. That's quality assurance and external quality assurance. Both are going to be maintained for remaining equipments. External quality assurance is meant to cover based on the past performance, testing of unknown samples, comparing performance with other benchmark imaging service providers. Right? That is also can be done. And provides an environment for improvements and correction. Today is the only way by which you can try to evaluate by another third party and try to have your equipment updated or calibrated for improvements. Periodic calibration of equipment, even here the requirement, maintenance for all your remaining equipment to be done, appropriate documentation, And wherever the breakdown has happened, we need to have a preventive mechanism in place. It means root cause analysis, corrective action, so that it's not again repeated. In fact, most of the breakdown rather than is replaced by a appropriate maintenance and a routine checks also using checklists. Right? Then, what the issue program when we talk about for the imaging equipment, these are the factors which are normally required. One is the congruence of the optical field and radiation field. You have to be congruent. Otherwise, you will have errors. Focal spot size is another requirement. Radiation leakage could also affect the performance of the imaging output. Use of appropriate imaging phantom not to verify your image clarity. Output related requirements, homogeneity, equipment safety. So these are the things which the imaging personnel they know what is to be done and all this. So all these are brought into the conversation. Here also you have an external peer review imaging skills, right? So whatever report that is generated from the imaging area is again reviewed by a team of radiologists, either it could be internal, external radiologists for comparison, review the report. That means what is done is report that is generated from your equipment compared with similar listing done on another equipment. Start comparing validity of your reports. So in all these cases, normally what they do is sampling to be done for each modality. ECG separately, X-ray separately, right? For each of them separate, you need to have a sampling done for peer review. Then discrepancy in the original reports, they are graded again based on the severity, impact on patient. The purpose of this is to prevent recurrence of errors. Outcomes of such reviews, these are to be discussed, documented. Right? This is the requirement for the standard also. Again, we are talking about radiation safety program, covers the imaging personnel, also the patients. The patients also need to be screened for safety even before taking an image. In fact, for instance, we have to do an imaging on a pregnant woman. You need to first verify whether it is definitely a requirement that they require to take an imaging. But again, the area where the imaging to be taken, probably maybe just X-rays to be taken for them. Then appropriate safety devices are used to shield the pregnancy area. Right? These are the requirements. So we talk about a lot of head aprons do not shield what they call. These are all there to shield the unwanted area where you don't want this clean to be done. PLD badges are another thing which safeguards the technician from any untoward radiation effect. That happens also. Right? So radiation safety devices monitored, they are periodically tested by sending the appropriate listing. Maybe we are talking about the ERB. The results are documented. Where they find the exposure level that for example, the PLD badge, that exposure level received by the technician is more than the permissive limit, then the particular staff need to be given leave with pay, right, for a period that has been recommended as part of the AER. Then display of caution signages. All the caution signage with respect to X-ray radiation area where restrictions, caution signage, display appropriate caution signage, including fire-related response, all are to be put up appropriately in this area. Cleaning of patient for risk, cleaning of pregnancy in case of women, that's what I told you already. For MRI, you choose cleaning of any magnetic substance, like if patient already is having any pacemakers, ensure this all checked before they are allowed into MRI. Right? MRI screening to be done for accompanying patient also, because maybe that patient who is going to go to MRI may not have a pacemaker, but the person who is accompanying him may have a pacemaker, and we make a lot of difference when they enter into MRI. Right? Recently, a major such mishap has happened to report in the news also. For a particular patient attendant wearing something and going in and they are sucked into the bush. So these are all caution signages, which that's why we say before even allowing that area, something called screening done. Verification, checking using a standard questionnaire. The staff need to check before allowing them even. Then risk evaluation should be done before any contrast are taken, contrast injections. Right? So these are essential requirements for screening. Yes, it was patient care to be continuous multidisciplinary. They were similar to the fourth edition standards. There we talk about coordination of patient in all the care settings. What are the care settings we talk about? It could be an OPD or it could be an IP or an ICU care setting. In all the cases, there should be a qualified people taking care of the patient care and information about the patient care and response to treatment should be shared among the caregivers who are the medical, nursing staff and other care providers, right? Like physiotherapists and all that. Organization implements standardized handing over committee. That is where we talk about many of the things that happen or through handing over mechanism from one shift to the other and the nurses know essential communications to be definitely documented and communicated. Handing over requirements, we talk about characteristic of high quality handoff, handing over, handoff of interactive communications of the patient information, the basic information, everything is given. It includes up-to-date information regarding the patient care till the previous shift, handing over has happened. Treatment that has been provided, medication that has been given, what is supposed to be given subsequently by the following shift person. Interruption during handoff are limited to minimizing the possibility information will fail to be conveyed or to be forgotten. So any important information are likely to be forgotten by word of mouth. All these are also definitely brought into documented forms, and that's a requirement of process for verification of the receipt, whether they have really understood whatever such communication passed around. So even though you might have documented it, because you have scripted in a hurry, there are certain things which are important to be understood. They need to check with them whether they have understood. Right? Including repeating, asking them to repeat back or a read back as a problem. The receiver of the handoff information has an opportunity to again review the relevant patient historical data, which include previous care provided, treatment, the services that have been provided till time. And accordingly, for any clarification, they also need to check with the clinician in charge for taking appropriate any further intervention. If patient transfer within the organization, it is safely as early to recharge to be used, or structure to be used along with sleep well, right? Refer patients to other departments, written guidance, we require appropriate written guidance for it, suggested. Organization ensures predictable service delivery by adhering to defined time. So this is where the patient information is very important. What they are going to do next as part of the plan. What are the next stages? When are they going to be discharged? Right? All these informations are appropriately, and you have a time schedule for it. Maybe food, what time they will be given. Right? What will be the diet that has been prescribed to them by the clinician? What is the contents of the plan care? Right? All these have to be appropriately given so that we are able to ensure predictable service delivery. Mechanism in place to monitor whether adequate clinical intervention. Then coming to the predictable service delivery timings of the time. Covering OP, lab, staging, appropriate patient education, communication of these timelines, communicating them that they are needed, patient communication in case any change in the defined timings, right? All this also to be done. In case of critical value are there adequate clinical intervention these are not where we are talking about such as where is a patient attending clinician needs to respond to such alert and record such response to the patient procedures. Periodical monitoring, review of the intervention, process, timeline when reassessment to be done, timeline when any other thing to be done appropriately. All these are to be clearly indicated. These OP patients will be made to alert the patient or family about critical values, whatever they are coming across. The test values that they are coming across, right? And the need for taking appropriate care, right? Including food, the diet-related requirements, or medicine intake when should be taken. All these are cautioned, particularly the cases where critical values have been observed, and when the necessity is that the clinician takes appropriate responsibility in doing this. Establish discharge process. Normally, discharge is a very long process, but it has to be planned in consultation with the patient and family, because you may be feeling, clinician may be feeling that patient is ready to discharge in next 24 hours, but the patient and family may be looking for somebody to take them back, be it to the village or somebody. So they are not ready. No point in you. Yeah.
Ram sir, I'm just stopping you in a between. Is it good that we can close it quickly and most
Another 5 minutes.
appropriately?
I'll just close it. I'll not take more than 5 minutes.
All right, sir. Thank you.
So discharge product, this important thing is it has to be communicated a decision is taken in discussion with the patient and the right? And it should be coordinated by various departments, because today, the laboratory is involved in getting some news or something, or pharmacy involved, right? Or some cases that can be medical legal cases, responding cases also there. So in which case the police intimation becomes the appropriate agencies involved, right? Yes, plan to discharge, confirm should define the timeline for discharge, make continual improvement. That means patients who are ready for discharge next 14 to 24 hours, identified previous date or during the clinician round, ensure this internally communication first, appropriate department, billing, insurance, policy, imaging, lab in charge, clinician in charge, duty doctors, right? Ensure all the bill discharge summary preparation, they are organized during this time. Communicate, check with the patient their readiness, requirement for any transport, so that also can be organized, so that that bed will be ready to be occupied by any other patient unless the patient is ready to move on, right? Unless these formalities are completed. So, confirm timeline for discharge will be related, which we already discussed. Variations in this, we look into reasons for them to be understood, appropriate action taken so that they are able to improve upon any variations in your discharge time frame. Discharge summary contents, broadly, the content normally should involve all this. Patient name, number, date of admission, date of discharge, reasons for admission, any significant findings that have been there in the patient. Diagnosis, what for he has been diagnosed, what are the treatment that has been given, and the condition of the patient at the time of discharge. We very clearly specified. Investigation results, follow-up advice, medication to take, diet related things, and these are to be the language the patient can understand. And instructions also to be there in the discharge summary about when and how to obtain urgent care. That means we need to define an urgency situation. The patient may not understand. So you need to explain, like, suppose in case you get any bleeding through the womb, or any severe pain or discomfort when you take a medicine, please contact back and give a contact number also. Right? And in that cases, summary also should be cause of death. Discharge summary also be given to the patient, a copy to be retained in the organization for the patient. Right? So